Zookeeper Rick was doing his daily check in the monkey area when he suddenly saw this baby monkey crying in the corner. What is this baby monkey doing here, Rick thought. None of the monkeys were pregnant, so where did they come from? As he looked more closely, he saw that this monkey was not like all the others. The upcoming DNA test would reveal a shocking truth. Rick has never seen a monkey looking like this before. It looked like half human and half monkey. He went to vet Charles. Charles was one of the favorite vets in the zoo. Charles was just about to perform the DNA test. He grabbed the needle in order to take blood and placed it on the monkey, but the needle immediately broke after trying to push it into the skin of the monkey. How can this be happening? The needles didn't work, so Charles decided to make use of a bigger tool, the knife. He wanted to make a small slice in the monkey and then take the blood. It took some effort, but Charles managed to get some blood samples from the baby monkey. Now they needed to wait when the results would come back, since it would take some days before the results came back. Rick and Charles decided to put the monkey in the monkey area with all the other baby monkeys. The next day, when Rick arrived at the zoo, he noticed something he had never seen before in his entire career working as a zookeeper. The baby monkey was standing on a rock, and it seemed like he was trying to say something to all the other baby monkeys who stared at him. This can't be true, Rick thought. It looked very weird, and this is a really unusual situation appearing in this zoo. It seemed like the baby monkey was showing this kind of leadership among his fellow other baby monkeys. But how is this even possible? The baby monkey was just 2 days old. The vet Charles got the results back from the DNA test. They both turned pale after seeing the results. It turns out the monkey has 25% human cells in his body. This was very shocking because this can only be seen in movies, and it is now happening in front of their own eyes. Rick and Charles were in a bizarre dilemma. In the end, Rick decided that he could take the monkey back to his house. At least there, the monkey would be safe from the outside world. Rick took the monkey back to his home. The monkey started to be a little bit feared walking and exploring the house. It took a while to settle him, but in the end, he seemed comfortable. James called the monkey Apollo since he was so special. The monkey kept growing really fast, which was quite unusual for the type of monkey. Rick decides to do some new DNA tests in order to see if something has changed over the past few weeks. It still turned out that he still contained 25% of human DNA. So nothing had changed over the time Apollo had been staying in his house of Rick. Rick even learned him doing sign language after some time. Due to the difficulty of it, it took quite some time before Rick and Apollo moved in the right direction. But after some hard work, both Rick and Apollo managed to learn it and communicate with each other. After a while, the monkey could communicate with Rick based on sign language. It was insane what Rick could accomplish with this monkey. It was a special situation where Apollo became his child, and they had a great relationship. After 7 years of living together, Rick and the monkey became best friends. Rick loved that monkey and would do anything in order to protect him. Years went by and the monkey started to grow really fast, both in his strength and his intelligence. It was Rick's friend Emma who also knew about this secret. She stood in front of the house and got into a heated discussion with the neighbor. The neighbor aggressively touched Emma, and Apollo saw everything behind the window. Apollo didn't hesitate and jumped on the neighbor with all the energy he had. He bit and scratched as much as he could and really damaged the neighbor. Things were getting really intense here. The neighbor was totally shocked by Apollo and decided to call the police. The police arrived and Apollo sat in the house while Emma and Rick talked to the neighbors and the police. The neighbor was still furious and wanted Apollo away from this neighborhood, so the officers took Apollo with them. Rick was driving with the police officers to the monkey sanctuary. They didn't notice that Apollo was a special monkey, so he went to a monkey sanctuary where he would be put with other monkeys. Rick already noticed that the sanctuary had very poor conditions, and he didn't like the owner of it. Rick continued to visit Apollo at the sanctuary. He saw that Apollo was not happy at all. However, Rick was determined to get his best friend Apollo released. He saw a little spot in the top right corner of the cage, which looked very weak. Maybe he could try to wrangle it open with his fingers. He tried, and Apollo needed to do it with all his strength. When it was almost wrangled open, he heard a loud bang. Apollo failed to continue his escape when the sanctuary's owner furiously stood behind him. Apollo crawled to the corner of the cage, but the owner aggressively grabbed him and took him into another room. Apollo was confused and scared. What did this man want to do with him? The sanctuary owner took out a water gun and pointed it at Apollo. The man was even unbothered by Apollo's obvious fear and continued to spray at him for almost an hour. The next day, he was back in the public monkey yard with all his other monkeys. He looked at each monkey and saw the sadness of each one. Everyone was underfed and just depressed from this poor sanctuary conditions. Apollo began looking for other weak spots in order to try to break out of it again. He scanned and scanned, and then he found it. Apollo notices a way out of the sanctuary. It was the roof. He saw a window that was slightly cracked. Tonight would be his night to break out. He knew he would probably only get one shot at fixing this, so he needed to be precise here. Apollo started immediately once everyone had left the sanctuary. He had no time to waste here. He needed to get out of there as soon as possible. He ran to Rick's house. He wanted to be there as quickly as possible and be with Rick again. Rick was somewhat surprised to see Apollo when he arrived at his house. How on earth did he get back home? Rick thought. However, Rick was also incredibly happy to see his best friend back at his house and away from that terrible monkey sanctuary. Apollo used sign language to describe what happened when the water gun was fired at him. He also noted that each of the other monkeys had previously been doused with the water gun and that they were all being underfed. And because of this, many monkeys are nearly dying there. Rick was totally shocked by what Apollo had informed him. Rick gestured to Apollo that he would file a complaint to the police tomorrow morning. Suddenly, Apollo became enraged and began aggressively jumping inside the house. It wasn't enough to just file a complaint, that wouldn't work. They would then be aware that Apollo was free and that he was different than all the other monkeys. That would result that Apollo would be locked up again. Rick and Apollo needed to take matters into their own hands. Rick was astounded by what Apollo was telling him and how he was doing it. Apollo seemed to have improved his intelligence while he was in the sanctuary. Apollo has advanced to a new level. Rick and Apollo sat around the table thinking of how to handle this situation. Rick and Apollo decided to make a plan on how to free all the other monkeys. They now had a plan to release all the other monkeys. The plan was to release the monkey into the forest a few miles near the city. It was a large forest with thousands of acres of trees and wildlife. It was the best place for them. Rick and Apollo prepared each other and headed off to the sanctuary. When they arrived at the monkey sanctuary, Apollo immediately climbed onto the roof of the sanctuary. It took about 15 minutes when the door of the sanctuary opened. Rick went inside and followed his buddy Apollo to all the other monkeys. Rick could already see how awful and horrible this monkey sanctuary was as they made their way to the monkey cages. Rick saw all the other monkeys, and he almost had to cry due to the poor condition of some of them. Rick freed everyone, and they all went to the front of the building. Rick quickly took his car and drove it all the way to the entrance of the monkey sanctuary. All the monkeys quickly got into the car, and Rick drove as fast as he could to the forest where all the monkeys could be released. When they arrived, all the monkeys jumped out of the car out of excitement and into the trees. Rick looked at Apollo and saw a glimpse of excitement from all the flying monkeys in the trees. Rick and Apollo looked at each other, and Rick nodded to Apollo like it's okay. This was his time to let go of Apollo and let him enjoy total freedom. Apollo and Rick embraced each other, and Apollo gestured to Rick that he was grateful for every moment he and Rick got to share. Rick shed a tear from this moment, and Apollo wiped the tear away. "Just good memories, my friend. Love you," he communicated. Then Apollo disappeared into the trees with all his fellow monkeys.